What's up, everybody? Today is still the 12th of August, 2024. In this video, we're going to be talking about the death of Susan Wojcicki, the former YouTube CEO, who is said to have passed away from lung cancer at the age of 56. We'll be focusing on the synchronicity and numerology of Wojcicki's death, as we always do. This is actually the second time I've talked about the former YouTube executive on this channel here in 2024. Back in the month of February, we learned that Marco Troper, who was Wojcicki's son, passed away while at UC Berkeley at the young age of just 19 years old. And you'll find a link to this video down below in the description. You'll learn about the Skull and Bones code and how this all connects to the numerology of YouTube, which was founded back in February of 2014. In the year 2018, there was a reported mass shooting at the YouTube headquarters where only the perpetrator was killed. This woman named Nasim Aghdam, an Iranian-born YouTuber, was apparently upset at the company and opened fire within its buildings. So we're going to talk about some connections to that. But I also want to mention how this all connects to other stories from the same exact day, August 9th. And I have videos on all of these events. First, there was a Vopass plane crash in the country of Brazil on August 9th. This was the same date as the death of wrestler Kevin Sullivan, who I also did a video on. Now, on this channel, we obviously talk about the language of Gematria, the ancient number lettering system, which is not only relevant to the old Hebrew and Greek languages, but also the English alphabet. These same ciphers that were applied to the ancient languages can also be used in English. We also take a look at Latin Gematria, the cipher which essentially bridges the gap between these older languages and English. And with all of these stories from August 9th, there's a very distinct feminine riddle that I need to talk about again. Now, I just did a video on Kevin Sullivan, whose first wife, Nancy Benoit, went by the ring name Woman. And here in the United States, Kamala Harris is trying to become the first female U.S. president. And this is the theme that's been permeating for a while, ever since the beginning of the Paris Olympics. Now, of course, a symbol of the feminine is water. I don't want to elaborate too deep on this. You can kind of do your own research. But when the Olympics opened up, all of the athletes were introduced on the Seine River, which is very unusual. It typically occurs in the stadium itself. And not only was it on the river, but it also happened during a significant rainstorm, which lasted several hours. On the American broadcast of the Olympics opening ceremony, it featured football player Peyton Manning, who has no real history in the Olympics, but was featured on the team nonetheless. Well, in the year 2007, Peyton Manning won his first Super Bowl, and he did so in the state of Florida during a rainstorm. It rained pretty much the entire second half of that game. The halftime show for that Super Bowl was performed by Prince. One of his most famous songs, Purple Rain, was played just as the rain started to fall. Prince, of course, had the famous song, I Would Die For You. U is the 21st letter, and he died on the date 4/21. Intriguingly, this is the Latin gematria of the name Susan, who we'll be talking about in this video. Prince also had a song called 319, like the word killing in gematria. Not only was he 319 days after his birthday when he died, but he was also 3,019 weeks old. That song 319 comes from an album named The Gold Experience. And at the Paris Olympics, many athletes had their own golden experience. The opening ceremony of the Olympics in the rainstorm was 3,019 days after Prince died, and it featured a performance by Celine Marie Claudette Dion, whose name has matching 227 gematria with the name Prince. This was a number that we also talked about with Kevin Sullivan. Well, the number 227 is also relevant to the feminine riddle that's playing out in the United States. On Inauguration Day next year, Kamala Harris will be 22,007 days old. And if you measure from her date of birth back to the birthday of Donald Trump, whom she's running against, their birthdays are separated by exactly 227 lunar phases, which is also 220 months and 7 days. Now, 227 is the 49th prime number. The name Kamala Harris equals 49. When NASA carried out its first moon landing, it was 4,009 days after they were founded. And Kamala Harris was exactly 4 years and 9 months old. So with all that, let's talk about how this connects to this plane crash that occurred on the same date. Once again, Vopass Flight 2283, killing over 60 people on board. This plane crashed in Brazil just 1 day after a tsunami in Japan. And Brazil and Japan were the most recent hosts of the Olympic Games before Paris. Rio in 2016 and Japan in 2020. In the language of Gematria, the phrase plane crash equals 56. This is the age of Susan Wojcicki when she passed away. 56 years old. And notice how she died of non-small cell lung carcinoma. A phrase which, in the alphabetic order, sums to the 56th prime number. 263. 263, also the value of skull and crossbones, in reverse. We'll look a little bit at how this connects to the skull and bones code later on. But back to this phrase, plane crash, which not only sums to 56, but also 308, which reduces to 38 in numerology. Well, in reduction, the name Wojcicki sums to 38. And if you measure from the date that she became the YouTube CEO to the date of her death, you get 3,838 days. Now, in America, the most tragic day for plane crashes was September 11th of 2001. The date we write on the calendar as 9/11. Measuring from the day that she became the CEO to the date that she stepped down last February, we find that Susan was YouTube's CEO for 9 years and 11 days. This is the Latin gematria of the phrase divine feminine. Remember, Susan helped lead the charge of powerful female executives, becoming the CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the world. Starting her career with Google, of course. 9/11 is also the satanic gematria of both ritual human sacrifice, and then the phrase blood sacrifice equals 611. Satanic gematria, a special cipher constructed around the 666 code. YouTube was founded back in 2005 under Brown Lunation 1016. Every new moon since 1923 has been numbered. And it was moon 1016 for YouTube's founding. If you flip that number upside down, you get 9101. And measuring from their founding date to the death of their former CEO was 1,016 weeks. On top of that, it was also 7,116 days from the company's founding to the date of her death. So you get an upside down 9/11 there. And when you measure the weeks, another upside down 9/11. Her full name in reverse reduction, Susan Diane Wojcicki, also 116. The same digits. Susan was born in the year 1968, just 1 month before construction began on the World Trade Center. Notice how she was born a span of 33 days before World Trade Center construction started. 33 days, that's all it was, between her birth and the Trade Center. Well, that's interesting because on the date of the 9/11 attacks, when the World Trade Center was destroyed, she was 33 years and 68 days old. 68, just like the year she was born and the year that the Twin Towers started to be built. Now, in my video from back in February, which again you can find linked in the description, I talked a lot about the number 45 and how this all connects back to the YouTube headquarters shooting in 2018. That shooting was carried out by a woman named Nassim Agdam, whose name equals 45 in the reduction method of Gematria. And that stood out right away because she was born on April 5th, or 4/5. YouTube was founded 4 months and 5 days after Yale's anniversary. It was founded on the 45th day of the year, exactly 45 weeks after Agdam's birthday. And when Agdam carried out the shooting at YouTube, it was on a date with primary numerology of 45. Susan was 45 years old when she became YouTube's CEO. Well, now check this out. Measuring from the birthday of Nassim Agdam to Susan's death is exactly 45 years, 4 months, and 5 days. That 2018 YouTube shooting was a span of exactly 45 years after the World Trade Center was first inaugurated back on April 4th of 1973. And yeah, this shooting, April 3rd, exactly 45 years later. Susan Wojcicki was 4 weeks and 5 days old when construction on the towers began. And when she died, it was 4 months and 5 days after the anniversary of the tower's inauguration. Her death was also 45 weeks after the anniversary of the Jesuit order. And YouTube has that Jesuit red. There's a strong connection there. But another thing worth pointing out is that wrestler Kevin Sullivan, who died on the exact same day as Susan, his middle name is Francis. Well, Pope Francis is the first bishop of Rome to have previously been a member of the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuit order. In the alphabetic order, Kevin Francis Sullivan equals 241. Well, if you measure from the founding date of YouTube to the death of Susan Wojcicki, we find that it was exactly 241 lunar phases later. Again, the moon, so significant to the divine feminine. Think about how the moon governs the tides on the earth. Water, the feminine element, which brings all of this together. So, Why is the number 45 so significant here? Well, in reduction gematria, the number 13, when spelled out, sums to 45, both forwards and backwards. When you write out 13 in reverse squares, which gives probably the biggest numbers of any cipher, notice how 13 equals 2001, which was the year that the World Trade Center was destroyed. 2001. She was the YouTube's CEO, and CEO equals 13 in reverse reduction. She died 10 months and 30 days after September 11th. But more important is that her death was exactly 130 lunar phases after YouTube named her the CEO of the company. Consider how both skull and bones and human sacrifice sum to 130. The nation of Iran sums to 130. It was an Iranian-born woman who carried out the YouTube shooting. Her full name, Nasim Najafi Agdam, sums to 103. Also notice how the shooter's full name has reverse Sumerian gematria of 1968. Don't forget the Sumerian cipher in gematria simply multiplies the alphabetic order by 6, the first perfect number and the number most closely associated with time. 1968, the year that Susan was born, and the year that the World Trade Center had its construction started. Also, her name is 68 in reduction. Construction starting on 6/8 of 68. Well, if you measure from that date, August 6th of 68 to the death of Susan Wojcicki, you get 56 years and 3 days. Which is interesting because she was 56 months and 30 days old when the towers were inaugurated. And she was born during Brown Lunation 563. 563, the 103rd prime number, connecting to the number 13 with the 0 dropped. In Latin gematria, WTC sums to 1003. What an incredible script. Also think about how the World Trade Center was supposed to hold 130,000 people. So a little bit more about how this syncs up with the death of her son from back in February. Remember, it was the 13th day of the month in February when Marco Troper died. The name Marco starting with M, the 13th letter. Susan died exactly 5 months and 4 weeks after her son. She also died 540 days after stepping down as YouTube's CEO. And in gematria, CEO of YouTube equals 54 both forwards and backwards. In fact, she was 54 years old when she stepped down. The phrase big tech equals 54 in ordinal. Susan, an employee of both YouTube and Google. 54 is also the gematria of the YouTube shooter Nasim Agdam, whose name is 54 and 540. The number 54 commonly seen in stories of ritual sacrifice, which equals 154. Ritual sacrifice also sums to the 54th prime number in the reverse order. When Marco Troper died, he was 19 years old. And he died on YouTube's 19th anniversary. which, geez, did I even catch that? Yeah, I did. 19th anniversary, 10 years and 9 days after his mom became the CEO. YouTube equals 109. Wojcicki equals 109. Well, Susan Diane Wojcicki equals 190, her full name in ordinal. And now she died 190 days before YouTube's next anniversary. Notice how her son's name, Marco Troper, equals 142, matching Nassim Agdam. 142 is a lot like YouTube's founding date, the 14th of February. Susan stepped down as the CEO 1,780 days after the YouTube shooting, and then she died 178 days after her son. Nassim Agdam has that 178 gematria with capitals mixed. In that same cipher, the moon equals 178. Talking a lot about the moon. Also, with prime numbers, the word moon equals 178. So next up, I want to touch on how there is a riddle connected to skull and bones. Notice how the name Susan equals 61 in the reverse alphabetic order. I talked about this in my last video because the name Kevin also equals 61. She originally started for Google, which equals 61. And she was even given employee number 16, which has the same digits. Susan died 61 days before the next anniversary of Yale University, which was founded on October 9th. The date of her death also had primary numerology of 61, 8 plus 9 plus 20 plus 24. Her son's name, Marco Troper, was 61. This matching skull and crossbones, which equals both 61 and 223. It should go without saying at this point, almost, that in the year 2023, Yale University turned 322 years old. The school is the home of Order 322, or the Skull and Bone Society. Well, the 223rd prime number is 1409. This is just like the ordinal value of Skull and Bones, 149. The number 149 is the 35th prime number. Not only did Susan die 35 days after her own birthday, but it was also 305 days after Yale turned 322. YouTube equals 35 in reverse reduction. And let's also appreciate how Yale was founded in the year 1701. And in standard English gematria, using the standard denary method for English, CEO of YouTube equals 1701. In fact, it also equals 1071 and 171. And now that I think of it, this matches Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan, dead on the same day, his name equals 171. So she died when Yale turned exactly 3,874 months old. And this was an alignment I mentioned in my video on the plane crash. Killing equals both 38 and 74. The name Susan equals 74 in ordinal. Susan was also born on a date with 80 numerology, syncing up with the reverse value of YouTube. So as always, fascinating stuff. And as we become increasingly aware over the years that I do this, these types of stories are all synced up with things I already covered in the past. And here we're looking at a video I did back in February. I got a lot of videos this year, don't I? But Superstream 69 is what you're looking for. And again, this is linked down below if you want to learn more about that story. But for now, that'll do it for this video. Much love to everybody for the continued support and positivity. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you all next time. See ya.